So I think that's enough of the preliminaries here, although one more note before we get underway. I do have a sponsor for these sessions and for my newsletter every month. This month's sponsor is Later Press, which is a fairly new company that helps authors publish directly to readers through their own website. It's a pretty interesting tool. I've poked around it myself. If you're interested in it, they take 0% of your direct sales. You only end up paying for optional features to help grow your readership. So if you're curious, go to laterpress.com and sign up for a free account. All right, so introducing Beth. Beth is the author of 3 middle grade series with a Big 5 publisher, Simon & Schuster, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, which is undergoing some changes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. It's never comfortable. You've also published some adult fiction, and I think this is fairly recent. You started a podcast with another author called Writers with Wrinkles. How many episodes do you have of that now?
We just published our 10th episode. So we do one a week, and we started in the beginning of September.
Okay. And it sounds like you're enjoying it based on our message.
I totally love it. I totally love it. It's so much fun. I'm a podcast junkie. So to be able to do it is just really fun. And I'm learning a lot. So I feel like it's expanding my brain, which is good.
All right, so here was the challenge that Beth sent me via email. These are her own words, so I'll read it and then let Beth jump in with anything else she wants to add. As the pressures on my time change, as in children getting older and I gain more bandwidth for work, I want to find ways to monetize my writing and author skills that are outside the actual writing of books and hopefully complementary. While book writing can support me individually, it has never been enough to support my family of 4, and I think it is just getting harder and more complicated, which is why I'd like to investigate other avenues. And just to emphasize, this is someone who has more than 10 books out on the market. You've been at this for quite some time. So I think this is an important message for those of you who are expecting book sales to lead to a full-time income. It's not simple. And Beth mentioned, I've been investigating freelance portals like Fiverr, Upwork. I haven't heard of Writing Studio. That sounds interesting. And organizing my credentials to upload, although I have not done any work through any of them yet. So Beth, is there anything you'd like to add, color, emotion to this?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting to find myself in this place. And I really do think it's just because as things change, I do find myself with more time. I think that personally, I'm able to spend a certain amount of hours every day producing creative work of value. I think at some point, I just stop being productive in a way that I'm not just going to delete it all the next day. So I think what I started to want to look for is something that can sit alongside the creative work. So the hours that I spend on that, I'm always going to spend on that. I love to write. I would do it if, the whole world ignored me, which sometimes it feels like they do. But anyway, so I think looking for something that can kind of sit with it and I can do that is less creative and less drawing on the same sorts of energy that I need for the fiction writing. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
It makes total sense. Yes. Okay. So I think the dream for a lot of people is to have all of the money come from the book sales. And you did mention that maybe that could support you individually, which is actually, I think, a huge success.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's funny is that when I talk to people, they're saying, and my agent will say this too, you're a success. And then the definition of success doesn't translate into the reality that we live in. So yeah, I have had some books that have sold really well, but it's not enough. You really need to be in that upper tier. Those people that they were talking about with the antitrust suit, that band at the very tippy top, of course, it all works wonderfully for them, but that is such a small group of people. So if you're thinking book sales, that is a steep hill to climb. And I mean, one of the things about the majority of my books are middle grade, which is 9 to 14-year-olds, generally speaking, if you're not familiar with that. That audience refreshes. So I get new kids coming through. So my book sales are pretty steady, which is also a bonus. I mean, a lot of books, it's like a movie. It comes out, you have to have a great opening weekend. You don't, that's it, it disappears. So I even get a little bit of benefit because I'm publishing for children. But it's still, it's never going to be, unless I jump to that upper tier, which is very statistically unlikely. It's hard to produce enough just with selling.
Right. And I wonder too, because you're in the children's market, those books carry a lower price point, and
Yes.
royalties are a percentage of usually the list price or publisher net. So that's not working in your favor either.
No, not at all, which is crazy. I didn't realize the difference because my first 3 books were adult books. And then I jumped over to the kids, and they're valued differently, which doesn't make any sense because they're still books and they're still attracting readers. And in fact, you're probably attracting more readers. But yeah, they're considered, everything is less when it comes to kids' books.
Yeah. Okay, so we know that for a lot of authors, that's the dream, that everything will come from the book sales. But as you said, very steep hill to climb. The good news is that every author has a demand curve, and this is a representation of that demand curve. And this is true of authors as well as publishers. Most just focus on a single point on that demand curve, which is the books, ebook, print book, audiobook, and then nothing else. This graph, what I like about it is it kind of indicates there's a spectrum of people who are willing to invest at varying amounts for varying experiences. There are some people who will never pay for your books, which might mean, I don't know, pirating or just reading what you're giving away for free. And then there are other people who are super fans and they're willing to pay like triple or 100 times more if there is something there that they want. So with that in mind, one thing that's often overlooked when we're thinking about increasing income or leveling up is how can you get more of those super fans, connect with them directly, and have them supporting your efforts in some way? This looks really different from author to author. But is this something you've ever thought about or toyed with? I know it's a little different for the children's market.
Yeah, because you have one of the weird things about the children's market. Well, it's not weird, it's just the way it's set up, is that your reader is always one removed from you. So you're going through a parent, a teacher, a librarian, a grandma. There's always somebody buying the book for the child because they're younger. So it's a different sort of relationship. You'd have to get the parent on board with supporting you, and then the kid grows out of you really quickly. So I think it would be, it's the reason that I have shied away from this in the past is my marketing skills, I'm not sure are up to snuff in terms of supporting that kind of effort. And also just the turnover in readership that you get with the kids, that I think you'd spend a lot of time chasing after new readers or patron support, and then it turns over again. So that's kind of why I've never pursued that. It just didn't seem like the time that I would need to spend would be worth the benefit.
Yeah, of all of the things we'll talk about today, I think this is maybe the toughest nut for you to crack.
Yeah.
If I were going to suggest someone to look at for inspiration, they're very different though, but still, there's someone called the Science Mom who started doing curriculum around science. It's very YouTube driven, but she's able to, like, there's a lot of the stuff she does that's free, but then she offers premiums to the parents, like worksheets and calendars and things of that nature.
Right.
I noticed that on your site, I believe you had something related to writing club, like writing club for
Yes,
kids.
I did. I did a when my kids were in elementary school and they're both in their older teens now. I did a after school club, writing club, creative writing club, and it was very casual. It was just an opportunity for the kids to write whatever they wanted and share if they wanted. And we would do writing prompts and we talked about, setting and character and stuff. But it wasn't academic because I wanted them to just be able to mostly just free write. And it was shocking how many kids would show up to this after school. And I think I did it once every 2 weeks. And I saved all of that material and it's on my website. And I still very often get people saying, can I use this for my writing club or, a library club? So that was what that was about.
Yep. If it were something you were really passionate about and you loved this idea of seeding writing clubs in libraries and schools across the country, I could certainly see you having a free version available, and then for your patrons, the people who support it, having extras or bonuses or regular prompts or curriculum to use in their writing club. That's just like the low-hanging fruit that I saw on your site that might.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I never thought about that at all. I just put it up there because I think I had mentioned a writing club either in something on Twitter or something, and a teacher had actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you tell me what you're doing? I want to do this." And that's kind of when I thought, I'll just put it up for people to look at.
Yeah, so I think there's potential there, but again, it has to be something you would be genuinely enthusiastic to do. Okay. So there's also potential in advertising or sponsorships because you have a podcast. Now, it's still early days for the podcast.
Yes.
But as it grows, and if you're having a fun time doing it, I think you could likely find authors, publishers, people in the book community who might be willing to pay a little bit of money to be a sponsor. And this is where I come to just a brief discussion of advertising and sponsorships. The easy thing to do here, and I think you might already do this, Beth, affiliate marketing links, like when you mention your own books or you mentioned other people's books, you use an affiliate link like with Bookshop or with Amazon so that you can get a little cut of the sales. That's super easy for anyone to do. If you had a really high traffic site, you might have something like Google AdWords. I don't think that applies here. But on the more advanced end of the spectrum is where you've got maybe you have relationships that you could draw upon to facilitate your first advertiser or sponsor. But since it is early days, I don't want to put this burden on you to go find a sponsor.
No, but we have definitely talked about it because I co-host with another author who is also a friend of mine, and we've talked about it, and it's definitely, it's been growing really nicely, more than I thought it would, the podcast. So, that's definitely our hope, is that it can at least sustain itself going forward. But yeah, super interesting.
Yeah. There's so much more interest in that today than there was even 5 years ago. So there are a lot of services that can help play matchmaker as well. They take a cut of the action, of course.
Right.
But I think
so. We host on Buzzsprout, and they also have, when you reach a certain number of listeners per month, then they will do it automatically for you.
Perfect.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. And they did say that they will let you, thumbs up or down on particular sponsors. So, if we have a writing podcast, I don't want to advertise something that's totally unassociated with this. So, we'll see. I think we're close to getting there. So I'm going to definitely see what happens when we do hit their level. And, maybe it'll be awful and I won't want to do it, but it's right on the horizon, which is kind of fun.
Excellent. All right. So let's move on to reader-supported options, which I've already said, I think this is probably not the path I would go down first. If you were doing something that it would make sense to collect one-time donations, I feel like writers don't use the PayPal donate to me button often enough or Venmo or whatever. But it has to be in tandem with something where people feel like, oh, I would really like to tip her or show my gratitude, like with Writing Club or something else. If you enjoyed this, consider, buying me a coffee. The intermediate stage of this is crowdfunding. Like if you had a project that you don't feel like there's a publisher that's really appropriate for it, you might be able to crowdfund it. And then the advanced is ongoing patronage or some sort of subscription or membership.
Right.
I think this is harder than it looks. Like a lot of authors do it, but it takes a lot of energy and effort. There's a lot of interest in Substack right now because of, you can see people succeeding at it, and it also can help grow your audience because they have a good recommendation system. But just looking at what you've got on the table currently, I don't know that any of these necessarily fit unless you were to do the writing club. So moving on, you mentioned to me that you do, or you could produce more work, but there's only so much your publisher is going to take from you. So
yes, that's
can you
true.
Talk more about that?
Yeah. So anybody who's published a book, it's a long process end to end. And I have a new book that will come out on March 7th. And I finished my last proofread on that, months ago. So there's a lot of time in there where you're not doing anything on the book that is going to be published. So, for instance, I could write 2.5 novels a year easily, but I'm on this cycle of 1 per year with my publisher, and I don't necessarily feel like the other thing I want to write is exactly the same stuff as I'm already publishing. So right now I'm working on an adult thriller and a new middle grade book at the same time. That adult thriller is not going to be with my Simon & Schuster kids publisher because that's not what they do. So I feel like I can generate more. I can write faster than the publishing train is rolling down the tracks. You end up with stuff just stacking up in the background, which is why I started thinking potentially about some sort of self-publishing for that, because it does give me control of the timeline a little bit. I mean, the alternative is that you're then trying to sell the other things that you're doing to a different traditional publisher. But I also, my feelings about traditional publisher these days is I'm not sure I mean, I have contracts and I am working and I will continue to do that, but I'm not sure I want to do that again with another book. I might want to try something different with another book, if that makes sense.
It does. And usually my first go-to for anyone in your position is, if you want to make more money from the writing itself and you're able to produce at a faster rate than what the publisher can really take from you, self-publish.
Yeah. And I think I've watched self-publishing evolve so much over the last, say, when I started writing maybe 15 years ago, it was really a tiny little area that nobody paid much attention to. And there were concerns about the quality that was happening and all of that is just completely transformed. And,
yes.
I think sometimes you really can't tell if something's been published traditionally or indie or whatever. It's so different. And I feel like I haven't spent the time kind of jumping in to be familiar with all the options and to get comfortable with them. Because for me, it's not the writing. I can write the stuff. It's just the process of then doing something self-published.
Right. So there's so many directions you could take with this. I don't think we're going to land on a final solution today, but one area that could be appealing is there's really an upswell of these reading and writing platforms like Wattpad, Webtoon, Tapas, Radish, Dream. I could go on. They grew a lot during the pandemic. Although like all tech companies right now, there's being some tightening, a little bit of a downturn.
Yep.
But don't let that scare
crazy
you.
Crazy out there. So are these, let me ask one quick question. Are these, I was reading something recently about the serial ones where you're publishing, are any of these like, okay, there you go. Yeah. There's the answer to my question. I was really kind of taken with this.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know anything about it. So it's great that this has popped up here because I think it's interesting.
Yeah, so there's, I'll send you the link afterward, or maybe I'll be able to Google it while we're talking. There was a really great Authors Guild panel within the last month or two about serialized fiction strategy. It had a Substack person on it, a Vela person on it, and then an author and someone else I'm forgetting. It's just really useful to get a sense of how are authors using this, how have they changed their writing style to accommodate for the serial structure, because you need
Right.
cliffhangers at the end of chapters.
Short chapters and cliffhangers. That's what I've heard.
Exactly, yes. So that would be a great thing to just start to think about. Is this for me? Do I want to give it a shot? And they're paying a lot of, Kindle is paying a lot of bonuses right now because they're trying to attract people.
Okay.
I would recommend it for like adult
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think that when I'm thinking about self-publishing, I'm thinking specifically adult. I think it's a harder sell for kids.
Yeah.
And also I'm already on this train with the kids books and that'll just keep going.
Yes.
But yeah, I love this idea for adult. It just seems fun.
Yeah, I think you would have fun. Well, at least I got that idea from the panel I watched. Those people genuinely enjoyed it.
That's a good sign.
The next thing that might be worth considering is Wattpad, Webtoon. They're now a merged company under a corporate parent. They launched a new app called Yonder. And this is a curated experience. So Vela, anyone can go and publish their serialized story there. With Yonder, they're being very kind of methodical and selective. And they're talking with agents about trying to get authors to come and do exclusives there, and they're paying advances. So this might, because you're already well established, I would certainly ping your agent and ask about this.
Oh, that's super interesting because I'd heard about it, but I hadn't heard any of the details. I didn't realize that it was something that they were hitting agents for. Yeah, I'll totally ask her. That's very interesting. So are they taking whole books, or is that serialized as well? Or are you just putting, what are they publishing specifically?
So there are two options. One is create something totally original and exclusive for them that's born as a serialization. The other option is to take your backlist, and I don't know how open they'd be to kids' work, and Simon and Schuster might not agree to it anyway.
No, they wouldn't be happy about that.
Take your backlist, and then with their assistance and guidance, you turn it into a serial. So there's some editing that happens,
right?
And then it goes up.
I mean, that's super interesting. Just I'm thinking about my adult books, which are the ones that I wrote first, which my agent has been trying to get my rights back for my books that I wrote for Hyperion Disney,
yes.
Because she wants to potentially continue the series in some other way. But this sounds like this might be an interesting opportunity for that. I'll definitely ask her about that. That's kind of new and cool.
It is, especially right now because they're sinking so much money into it.
Right.
So get in early.
Yeah, so exactly. It's show up now.
Deborah's asking, with Vela, do you know if the author retains all copyright? And yes, you do. The same is true with this opportunity at Wattpad. They do have restrictions on what you can do with the material. So like at Wattpad, or sorry, not Wattpad, at Kindle Vela, if you serialize something there, they ask that it not be a book that's available for sale already on Amazon, because they feel like that's going to cause confusion with people who don't realize, oh, I've already read this and now it's just chopped up into pieces.
Right. I could see that. That makes sense.
So you do want to read those terms closely. Usually both Vela and, I don't know about Yonder since it's really by invite only, but definitely for Vela, they just lay out very clearly, here's what you can and can't do. So Deborah, just make sure you take a look at that before you repurpose any older content. But the nice thing I think about Vella, especially if you're experimenting, which you might be doing, Beth, is that once you're through with the serialization, or you feel like the experiment is done, you can take it down if you wish, and then release it as a book. So it's almost like you're double dipping.
Oh,
you're getting your
interesting. Yeah,
serialization income, and then you get your book sales income.
that's very interesting. I didn't realize that. That's interesting to note.
And Colleen points out that Dickens and Arthur Conan Doyle started with serialization, and it is like a Back to the Future sort of
It
time
totally
that we're in.
is. When I was a kid, my father, who's in his late 80s now, we used to listen on, this was in upstate New York, a national public radio station that would play these serialized radio programs from the 1930s. And it was, I loved it. Like I was like 10 and I would be glued to the radio at night listening to these serialized things. And it's all the cliffhanger and it's all the short little bit and you're just hooked. So yeah, I mean, I have a very fond spot in my heart for serialization, which is why when I saw Vella, I was like, what is this? What is this magic that they're doing? How do I get in on this?
Indeed. Okay, so switching gears entirely. When we kind of first communicated about this clinic, and as you mentioned in your initial challenge, you're thinking about doing some freelancing, charging for editing. And this is definitely like what so many authors do to keep the lights on, in addition to teaching and speaking. For today, I'm just going to focus in on the services or the freelancing piece, because I feel like I've got you early.
I'm unformed.
So I did see, I think, was this on Fiverr or Upwork? I can't remember.
I did. I put it up there and then I took it down because I was like, no, I need to change it. I wanted to change it because I was gonna, well, as we mentioned before this all started, I've been doing all of this editing of college essays for students. And so I was gonna try to add some of that because I feel like by the time I'm done with this round of seniors, I'm going to have a lot of experience. And I think that will be helpful. And there seems to be at least a small market for that type of polish. And it's really just trying to get them to make some sense because, 17-year-olds are not known for making a lot of sense on the page. So just, it's not like rewriting, it's just guidance and pointing out that using the passive voice for everything is not the best idea. So I wanted to change this to include some of that.
Okay. So I'll be really I'll lay all my cards on the table with this. I'm not a fan of like the Fiverrs and the Upworks and some of these really huge marketplaces. I'm not even quite a fan of the smaller marketplaces that are writing and publishing focused. So that would include like Readsy, for example, and maybe Writing Studio, which I haven't heard of. But that said, I don't think they're bad ways to get your feet wet. And I think you would totally be a great fit for something like Readsy if you wanted to put your shingle out there, although you're not going to attract students with that. It's going to be other authors.
No, true.
This brings me to what I think is probably the most important thing, which is positioning. So deciding where you really want to plant your flag. I think one of the mistakes that people make is they try to be open to everything and anything. And that just kind of it makes the marketing that much more difficult because it's different audiences, possibly different price points, different markets. So what I usually encourage folks to do is to pick the one thing you can knock out of the park, and or you really know how to reach that contingent of people who are dying to hire you. Because it just streamlines how you get your clients, and it streamlines your efforts. It makes everything more efficient. So to that end, sometimes I see new freelancers, they'll go super broad and they'll say, well, I'm offering editing services, or I'm offering copywriting, or I'm offering coaching. The first thing to think about is how can you narrow in on the audience for that? So is like copy editing for genre fiction, or copywriting for small business, or coaching for memoirists? Because then like people like myself who make lots of referrals can say, oh, I know the perfect memoir coach, or I know, oh, you're in this genre, I know exactly who specializes in that. And usually the clients get more excited because they think, oh, this is someone who really understands me. They specialize in
right.
this. So some of the fears that I see around, like, as soon as I tell people to like go narrow, there's a lot of fear around that. Like, well, what if it's too narrow? Or what if there's not enough work in that space? Or what if I don't get enough clients? But I think there are.
Feel the opposite though, because
Oh, good.
I panic when I see the wide open ocean of just everything. I feel like, well, I can't even go in that ocean because I'm surely going to drown straight away, and that's going to be the end of it. So I feel like it's good to hear this, like definitely do narrow, because that's my natural desire to kind of be able to get my arms around it. So I like to see this. I like someone else to tell me this, so I don't feel like it's just me reacting to the panic of like, there's too much.
Good. Now I don't have to convince you.
I'm easy.
So this is just kind of reiterating what I've already said and stepping people through, thinking through how do you want to get narrow. And it's almost always based on who you can reach or who you already know well. It's basically, who are you confident with? You speak their language, you know where they live metaphorically. And that just makes the whole process so much easier. The other thing that's really, I think, useful is if you've been continually asked to do something and you didn't even really ask for this work, but it keeps landing in your lap. And before we went live, you mentioned to me you've been working on essays, student essays. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's through my local high school. The PTA provides this service to seniors who are applying to college to get some other people to just read their essays. And these are essays that the draft is done, so you're not starting from scratch. And they submit it, and we get a couple of adults to look at it. And it's been really, I enjoy it because I feel like some of the kids I know, most of them I don't. It's a very large school. My son is a senior there now. It's a big school. There are a lot of students, so I'm only going to know one here and there. But I get what they're trying to do. And so to be able to look at their work and give them a little bit of guidance on how to make it more applicable to like a larger experience or shift that they've gone through that illustrates for the college some sort of learning from your experience. And it's fun to go for the first draft and you ask them a bunch of questions and then they send you another one and you can see how they're really taking to heart what you've told them and that they're adjusting and they're trying to dig a little deeper. So it's been really fun. And I've been, as soon as people find out that you write for a living, they say, hey, my kid needs somebody to look at their essay. So I always had this happening, but it has ramped up a lot lately. I think too, some of the lull in education during the pandemic, a lot of these kids feel like they're behind the ball. So they want some extra help. I've seen a lot of kids who I think feel just insecure about their writing, which maybe they wouldn't if they had not missed that big chunk of time in school. So I feel like it's just it's more. And I've also had a handful of people who work as college counselors ask me to look at things that they've already looked at, but they want another set of eyes. So I feel like that, and it's fun. I actually enjoy it. And it's very different from creative output. It's like a different part of your brain that you're using. So the reason that I pulled that fiber thing down was I was like, I think maybe I want to do more in this direction than just like, hey, I'll just edit anything. Maybe that's not what I want to do.
Exactly.
So that's kind of that little thing that's going on right now.
Yeah. So you were already going down the right path without me. So
stumbling down the path.
So the rest of what I'll tell you on this is mainly just helping ensure that your efforts pay off more quickly. Usually what I suggest to anyone attracting clients, regardless of the type of work. Just make it super easy for people to reach out unless you're overwhelmed. So the ways that this happens, it's multifaceted. Some people are comfortable putting their phone number right on their website. Others will just have a button that says sign up for a free 15-minute consult. For really large editing jobs where there's a lot of money at stake, like in the 4 figures, sometimes there's like some sort of free sample edit or just a low cost edit. So some of the tactics depend on how much money you're going to be charging. And because if you're charging very small amounts, usually you don't do much or any work for free, because it only makes logical sense. The other thing is think about any sort of packaging that might go around what you offer. Maybe you've now spent enough time with these student essays that you understand what they need, and there are certain like bonuses or added ways you can help, and there are different like tiers or price levels that you would charge depending on the amount of help needed. I can very easily imagine like the most expensive tier essentially being ghostwriting the essay.
It happens a lot, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. So, also this is all to your comfort level. I don't want to suggest you do.
Right. No, I know. And I hear what you're saying.
But often you can, like, if you poke around established editors or freelancers sites, you often find these packages. This one that I have on the slide here is stolen from, I'm going to blank on her name. She's an agent, Rachel someone.
Somebody.
My apologies, Rachel. I can't remember your last name. But yeah, it helps streamline, and it also tells people what they're going to get. They might not even know what they need until they see you describe it. So it's a really powerful marketing tool as well. So this brings us to the copywriting issue. I think, especially for strangers, like probably your initial clients would come from referrals, people but once you get strangers coming in, the copywriting is everything. So you just want to make sure it expresses your personality, your voice, your work style, in a way that appeals to your target client. And I'm not talking about smarmy marketing copy. Like, wait, there's more, but something that your audience would respect.
Right.
When people buy services, especially the more expensive they get, the decision to work with you or not, I find, is like psychological or emotional rather than logical. Like they want to feel understood, they want to feel seen, they want to feel like validated, that their problems are real and that you're here to help them solve those problems. So just always keep that in mind when you're preparing this copy. That's why you often see any sort of product, service, or class will often start off by identifying the problem or the pain point that you hear about the most. And then you describe the problem and show you understand it, and then position yourself as the solution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this brings us to the marketing issue of how will anyone know that you're offering this help? And this is how I break it down. There's your direct reach and digital reach, like your email newsletter, if you had a blog. I think you do have a blog, maybe dormant.
I do. It's been resting for a while.
Yes. So people just searching around and stumbling on you. There's social media for spreading the word. Then usually how things start off, though, is through the existing relationships you have. And it sounds like you've already got, you've got your fingers in some things that will help you drum up that initial business.
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. Once word spreads, I find that, especially locally and regionally, you soon find yourself with, if people love the work you do, you soon find yourself with more than you can handle. And then the last 2 options would be like just running ads, whether that's on social media or locally or regionally. And then finally, marketplaces like Readsy or wherever would be the most natural fit. Like if it's student essays, probably not Readsy, something else.
Yeah.
But I definitely like to prioritize the stuff that's relationship driven, and then the direct reach. What do you think? Do you think if you like put out your shingle and had a really nice page describing what you do, what do you think would happen?
I think that I'm hopeful, I guess, that it will be self-reinforcing so that when you do a little, then it spreads and spreads and spreads. I feel too like because I have a relationship with parents and people who have smaller children, those children are growing up and they're going to go be writing college essays in a hot minute. So there's almost a little bit of a connection there if I could, stretch it a little bit. But I was thinking about this in terms of my newsletter, which only has about 500 subscribers because I'm very bad at, kind of keeping it up to date and whatnot. But I was thinking that I need to do that so that the fact that I do have, if I am going to offer this service, that it is in that too, because those are people who maybe not today, but later down the road would be interested in using a service like that, like the college essay thing specifically. Right. So yeah, I feel like just talking about it being this specific thing, this is the kind of editing that I want to offer, that I find interesting, that I think I can do well, helps me not feel overwhelmed and then just say, not going to do anything because I can't handle it, So right. I think this is so useful just in like getting myself focused on, and then I have a reason to go do the newsletter, and I have a reason to put a link on my, or, add to my website and make a section for that, and to talk to different people and to use social media for, a purpose rather than just pictures of my cats, which is mostly what I do.
Which is totally acceptable.
I know. It's just like stress relieving.
Okay. So one thing long-term you want to think about or keep an eye on or just, monitor is the funnel for how people find this service. I mean, it might be mainly word of mouth, and that's fine. But, for me, when I started offering editing services, especially for like queries and book proposals,
right,
it all started with having a really comprehensive article, a blog post at my site that got search traffic or that got shared. And then people typically, if they haven't heard of me yet, they might follow or subscribe or hang out with me for a while, whatever that means to them. And then once there's some trust or familiarity established, that's usually when, when the time comes, they think of me first and they'll hire me to consult or to edit. So to show, like, this is back when I used to do book proposal editing. I don't do it anymore, but for free, I had this comprehensive post. I had worksheets. I had a Facebook group. Occasionally, I do a cheap class on the topic. For a while, no longer, I had a self-study. And then the most expensive thing you could do was hire me for one-on-one consulting with your proposal. I also had an interactive 4-week course that I would offer a couple times a year. Sorry, folks, I don't do this anymore. Don't go looking for any of it. But I show it here just to demonstrate that all of the points on the demand curve for a service. So if it becomes really successful, there are lots of different ways to make money from it.
right.
So there will probably always be some level of free, and then an inexpensive level, and then the premium level.
That's good to think about. It's like a good framework, I think, for thinking about it.
Colleen mentions another thing that's sort of apparent but not mentioned: partner up with an established workshop provider, like with Jade. So
right.
It's very true. Like if you were going to do like manuscript editing, like for novelists or something, by all means, you could do a guest post at my site. And I have editors, freelance editors, they're my number one guest post sort of person, right, because it works. So that's something else you can consider. Like for student college essays, I'm the wrong platform for that. But
Right.
I imagine there must be countless other places where if you did an article for them, or you were a guest or a partner or on their podcast, that would certainly drive business.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about too, those connections.
Back when I was doing this actively, because my blog post was so popular, if people typed in nonfiction book proposal consultant, they would actually get my website at the very top. Lots of reasons for this that aren't necessarily easily duplicated, but I do mention it just to say you'll want a dedicated page on your site that's really literally titled with whatever is the service people would Google for, just so you can capture any potential traffic of people wandering about looking for help.
Okay, no, that's good. That's good to know.
Which brings me to the final thing I wanted to bring up. I'm wondering if it's time for a website overhaul.
Definitely. I mean, it's long past time for a website overhaul. Oh my God. I don't even remember when this website was put together. It must have been like 2015, because I was doing it for the kids' books, and they started coming out in like 2016 or 17, something like that.
Do you want to talk about this more? I have a lot I could tell you about what I would do, but
yeah, I think the challenge is, in my head anyway, is that if you're doing different things, so for instance, I have the kids' books and I have some adult fiction that's out there, and if I'm doing freelancing stuff, how do you do it all through one site? So it's not the kind of, because sometimes you open those sites and the person does all these things and you're just like, nope, can't read this. This is too much, can't deal. And you just move on. So how do you avoid that if you're coming from different places?
Yeah, let me stop the share and I'll pop open a browser. Give me just a moment. And I'll go to your site to start. I'll also open up a couple others. Just a moment. And then we'll start the share again. All right. Okay. So usually the way that you handle different aspects of your career, or different reasons people might be visiting your site, it's almost always handled through the navigation bar. And I think this would work fine for you. So what would happen is we've got your navigation here, which is very straightforward. I think it works fine. You're going to keep the same main categories, but ultimately what happens is you add another one that says services or editing, or however you think is, whatever word you think is best.
Right.
The other way that this sometimes happens, and let me see if I can find, I don't know that Amy Stewart offers anything, but she's a good one to look at for differing priorities. Amy Stewart is an interesting example because she's not just an author, she's also an artist. So you can see here on her homepage, she has, you can go here and check out all my books, or you can go here and see all my art. And it works fine. And you'll notice that the navigation has, books, paintings,
right,
also events, classes, etc. So I don't think she does any services, but everything that's important to her has a little place on the homepage. And I think it's still reasonably clear what we're going to get. Another example I sometimes like to show is Courtney Mom, who writes novels, memoirs, and offers services. So you'll see that she's got her books here. She also does short pieces. So there's a separate tab for her selected writing. And then her services, which include helping with queries, are under here. And you'll notice she's got packages.
Yeah.
It's very simple, straightforward. So those are two sites that you could think about when you're revamping. What are some options you have for design? For you, because you have such a number of books, what I would love to see is more focus on the covers on the homepage.
Right.
I'm wondering if I can think of an author off the top of my head. Maybe I always go to Barbara Freethy because she has so many books. Let's see. Yeah, so if you
Oh
go to
yeah,
her
I know her site. I've seen her site before.
so there they all are. Now this is really a matter of personal preference. I'm not a huge fan of seeing the book in these little boxes like this. I much prefer just
Right.
to see the cover. So that's what I would do. I think it's less busy that way, but still
Yeah.
it's the right idea. And then as we scroll down, we get more books. And for someone with a lot, I consider you to have a lot of books, which is good. So I like to see
I use them to
books.
stack up my laptop when I do Zoom, so they have a purpose.
And what else? Oh, you're on Wix, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know much about Wix, and
Neither do I, unfortunately.
but what occurs to me, and it may be working you into a corner, you've kind of got the box within a box thing going on,
Yeah.
which I think you'll want to try to eliminate if you can. But that would require, I don't know how to do that in Wix, like if there's a certain template you could use that would avoid that or whatever.
It is very template driven, or it's supposed to be. I have not spent enough time, clearly, obviously, enough time in it to really get to be able to do things. But I think it's supposed to be, of all of the things like this, pretty easy, quote unquote easy
Mm-hmm.
to manage. So the website overall is definitely on my list because it just doesn't serve any good function now. It's not good at any particular thing.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, if you were to get more serious about the email newsletter, and I'm not going to get on my hobby horse about email during this session, but if you were to get more serious about it, I would say we need more information about what people get if they sign up. And you may not know because you're not sending it often enough. But
yeah, and it was a weird combination for a while of people who had signed up when I was writing adult books, and then people who had signed up when I was writing kids books. So I think I'm not even sure I think the majority are definitely now kid book signees. But there's still some people there from when I wrote adult stuff. So it's like kind of in multiple places.
mm-hmm. Yeah. For inspiration, I'll mention Meg Medina's site. I actually had her on a clinic not long ago to talk about website, blog, newsletter, and how to prioritize those things. And I've always loved her website for its directness. Now, not everyone may want to have their face that big on their website. It's your choice, but I think it just does a really nice job of being very it's to the point. Now, I think your homepage is going to be more involved than this. Like, this is really disciplined. It's amazing how disciplined this is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to the books page, like this, I think this is a marvelous presentation here.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
The newsletter now has a really nice devoted tab because she's gotten more serious about that. So this is one that you could potentially mimic if Wix cooperates with you.
Right.
Okay. So let me go ahead and, do you have any questions about your site before we move on?
No, I think I know. I mean, I know that it has to serve different purposes, and I think it's just a matter of finding some comps that do that well and then figuring out how to do that. So
agreed. Okay. So I actually think that might have been the last
slide
point. Let me just make sure. Yes. Okay. So I'll just briefly mention before we go to Q&A that the next clinic will be in December. I'm going to be talking with Sarah Chauncey about how to secure teaching gigs as an editor or writer or author or whomever you might be. I'll talk about what's that like when you really don't have any teaching credentials and how you ramp up from there. So I'll go ahead and stop the share, and we can do some Q&A if there are any questions. I don't think I may have knocked them out as we went.
I think you were very, very efficient at answering them as you went along.
Do you have anything you want to touch on or bring into the picture before we close this out?
I think, no, I definitely feel like I have a better to-do list now that is less overwhelming. And I think just kind of settling with the idea of diversifying what I'm up to. And a lot of those things are kind of fun to do. So it's not like a feeling of dread of, oh no, I got to go and do this. I think they're all related and they can feed off each other. So yeah, I think I feel pretty good about that. It's like therapy.
It is very much so. The one thing, as I was thinking about the organization of this presentation and what we should talk about, the one thing I just didn't really bring to the table was, how do you sell more of the books you already have? Which is the big question I often get.
That's a whole like another hour of conversation. I mean, it's, publishing is, I think the thing that you don't know, just super quick, the thing that you don't know when you're going in and you sign that first book contract, and the publisher, and this is my experience with two of the big fives, that they're like, yes, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And most of that doesn't happen. It just is how they kind of, maybe they intend to and they want to, but it doesn't happen. So much of the marketing is on the author. And quite honestly, to move the needle in any significant way when it comes to sales, it's almost impossible as a single person. Like, you have to do things that, it's a job. You have your writing job and you have your marketing job. And if you're not a marketer, it's a huge challenge. I mean, I struggle with it, obviously, constantly.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. We could have just spent the whole time talking about how to sell more, and and anything I could have told you, it might not have worked.
Yeah, and some of it, I mean, my agent told me very early on, she was like, you need a great book and you need some pixie dust to be sprinkled on it. And the pixie dust is totally outside of your control. It's just like, sometimes you see that moment and you're in the right place at the right time, it just takes off. And then sometimes you have a great book and nobody reads it. So, there's some luck involved.
There is. I'd never asked Meg Medina this directly, but from my perspective, she spends a lot of time on reader engagement, like on TikTok, Instagram. She just seems super engaged also with libraries and schools. She's clearly putting all of her effort, I think, into moving more books, getting more widely known. How much that's working for her, I don't know, but that would be like another strategy. Like, another author might prefer to pursue that, just really doubling, tripling down on getting the books out there.
Yeah, and there's with kids' books, you can incorporate school visits into that and visit libraries and things like that. So you do have more options, but it is super time consuming. Yeah. And so you have to be prepared to spend all your extra minutes on that.
Yes. A few questions came in as we were talking. Dave's asking about webinars and how to present them and how much work is required to get up to speed. Dave, come to December's session, because we will definitely be talking about
this. I'm coming. I'm putting it on my calendar.
And how much work is required to get up to speed is really about how comfortable you are teaching online to start with. So we'll go through those issues. An anonymous person is wondering, what do I suggest for segmenting audiences for an email list, or do I suggest segmentation at all? I actually, years ago, I started or tried to segment my list by asking some questions when people signed up for the list, like, do you write fiction? Do you write poetry? And then I never used the answers to determine what I sent. 'Cause it's a lot of work. Like
Yes.
you're doubling the work, maybe even more, because you have to come up with unique sends to make that segmentation meaningful. So
Mhm.
eventually I just stopped asking the questions, and I don't segment. That said, advanced marketers will tell you that it's good to have a segmented list.
Yeah.
And I think where it's probably most applicable to the folks joining us today is if you do a giveaway, you do some really special marketing promotion, and you want to see how those people perform over time on your list. It's
Mhm.
really nice to have them tagged according to how they got on the list, so that you can see, should I do that again? Did they drop off immediately? Did they report me as spam? So tagging, I really like, just knowing the source of how people ended up with you and then how valuable they've become over time. And then Yasmin's asking about merchandising. Um, I know in the kids market that could actually be quite interesting, but I know it's also hard to profit off of merchandise. Like I think the
Yeah.
margins are super thin.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think you have to be a fairly huge book.
yeah,
You have to have one of those titles that everybody knows in order to benefit from it.
yes,
I mean, that's my impression anyway.
mine too. All right. Renee says, I missed the date of the December clinic. Can someone give me that date and time? I'll do even better. I will give you the sign up link if you just give me a moment. And that way you can join directly after this. Grab that for you. Oops, wrong one. Okay, there it is. All right. So I think that ends it for today. Beth, thank you so much for being willing to come on and talk about your business and being so
Yeah. Thank you
open.
for having me. I think it's been really, really helpful.
And thank you all for joining me on this afternoon. I hope to see you at a future clinic. And as promised, the recording of this will be posted later today at my YouTube channel if you want to go back over anything we discussed. So thank you all and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.